In this video, weather gets in the way of our birding.
Hey folks, we're not birding.
No, we're stuck here.
We're stuck in. We were going to go birding this weekend because it's usually our weekend we would go birding, but there's red weather warnings, high winds. I don't know if you can even hear it in the background. The flooding everywhere. We can't really even get out of our road because there's flooding. We're stuck. So this video might be, instead of our usual weekend madness, we're going to hope the wind stops enough
so we can go out tomorrow.
So we can go out tomorrow, at least locally, and try and find something. It's certainly going to get in the way of our challenge. Regardless, keep watching and find out what on earth we do.
I'm aboard.
Aye.
The following day, after most of the floodwater had dissipated, we bravely headed out into the very, very windy weather. Our first port of call was the North Wales coast, namely the beach at Llandulus. When we arrived, the wind was blowing hard and the sea was very, very choppy.
It's still really windy!
I could see some sea ducks in the distance. These were common scouters. The unusual thing today, and probably a result of the horrendous weather the previous day, there were hundreds and hundreds of gulls on the beach. Mostly herring gulls, but there were mixed in some black-headed gulls and a couple of both lesser blackback and greater blackback gulls too. I'd never seen this many gulls here at one time, so it was quite a sight. We then moved slightly up the coast about 10 minutes to Colwyn Bay. The sea here is usually very busy for scouters, and today, even with the weather, it was no different. We watched dozens of these birds being thrown around by the waves. This winter there's been a reasonably regular surf scouter amongst them, but today I struggled keeping the camera still in the wind, so it would have been a real challenge to try and scan all these birds for it. Although we did stick around for a short time, Kaylee resorted to birding from the car due to the fact that it was bitterly cold. As we hadn't seen any wading birds at all today, we decided to take the drive into Anglesey to RSPB Cors Ddyga, which is generally quite a hot spot for some of the wading birds. When we arrived, the road was blocked by a tree that had fallen over in the previous day's gales. Luckily, there was someone who pointed out another way to get to the car park, so we turned back and went a different route. When we arrived back, there was a gentleman dealing with the fallen tree. We headed out onto the reserve, immediately noticing that the normally quite shallow water that usually attracts wading birds and ducks wasn't very shallow anymore. The mud spits and banks that were usually home to snipe, lapwing and other waders were very much underwater, which unfortunately meant no wading birds. But there were plenty of ducks. We saw large flocks of the very common winter duck, the widgeon. There were groups of our smallest duck, the teal, and also a small amount of shovelers too, like this male bird that was feeding alongside a widgeon. As we walked down the path, we did notice a small bird in front of us. This little fellow turned out to be a stone chat that seemed to have found something to eat, but was struggling to get it down. It did look like an insect of some kind, but seemed to prove a little too big for the bird. A little bit further down the path, there was a female stone chat with an equally unmanageable snack.
It is bitterly cold, especially with this wind. I want to see the state of Kaylee. Oh my life and time. This is tough.
Regardless of the horrendously blustery cold weather, we soldiered on a little bit further down the path, passing a pair of mute swan, this one watching me intently, finally getting to a river bridge at the end of the path and turning back round. On the way back, we noticed a little bird on the edge of the water in the tall grass. We hoped it may be a water pipit because they've been seen here before, and that is kind of my nemesis bird for this year, having failed to find one on many occasions. And again, today was no exception. This turned out to be the more common meadow pipit. As we got nearer to the car, I noticed a large shape in the distance, like a bird of prey. And it was. This is a marsh harrier that was really struggling to cope with the wind. These birds are usually pretty graceful, hovering or gliding slowly over the top of reed beds. On this occasion, this individual was less than graceful, but still a fantastic bird to see. And as we watched it doing an admirable job hunting over the marsh, another large bird flew into our sight as well. This was a heron that appeared to just be moving position from one part of the reed bed to another. We did stop briefly to try and find a bird that we couldn't identify that flew low into the reed bed. Anyway, we didn't find it, and we were so cold we were losing the feeling in our hands and faces, so we headed back towards the car to decide what to do next.
It's very cold.
It's really cold.
It's very, very bitterly cold out there.
Very windy.
Very windy too still. Apparently it was certainly less windy than yesterday, gale force, but still it's brisk, to say the least. There's a few ducks there, still no wading birds, which is crazy. We did see a lovely marsh harrier, which was very nice. We're going to move back down the coast to a couple of other places, so stick with us for that, see if we can find some wading birds.
We got back off the road and off Anglesey.
Where are we going?
We are going back into England, so it's a bit of a change of plans because this year's Nemesis bird has showed up in Hale at Car Lane. It's a water pipit. We've missed them 4 or 5 times this year, something like that. So one was seen about half an hour ago, and it's going to take us an hour and 20 minutes to get there. So we're dreaming and really hoping it's going to stay there. Stick with us. Hey folks, it's still freezing cold. We're at Hale, Town Lane in Hale, looking over Car Lane pools. Really hope this bird's here. It's evaded us half a dozen times already this year. It's become like the Nemesis bird of the year.
We can't find it.
We can't find it.
Car Lane Pools is some flooded farmland that's in between a road leading to Hale Village and a single track country road on the other. This place can be very good for roosting waders and ducks and gulls, and occasionally that Nemesis bird, the water pipit. One had been reported here about 2 hours previous, and we were really hoping it was still present. But like the other places we've been to today, it was very quiet for birds. The only species here in reasonable numbers was black-headed gulls and teal. I did spot the not so common gull roosting on a grass bank in one of the pools, but no water pipit as yet. And as we scanned further around the pools and in the fields, getting ever colder with the wind chill, we started to think this species has got a personal vendetta against us, or sees us coming and hides. With no luck, we moved round onto the single track farm road to try and see the pools from a different angle, and to warm up a little bit in the car. When we got there, I did spot this very unusual and quite striking blue-green looking pheasant. But again, no water pipit. One thing I did find is our first wading bird of the day, this lone redshank that was stood in a shallow pool. As we were about to give up and leave, we did get a flyover by this amazing great white egret that subsequently landed in the pool against the reed bed, stayed for a minute and then took off again, presumably to roost. Unfortunately for us, it was getting dark and even colder. Ultimately, we had to give up on trying to find the endlessly frustrating water pipit and call time on quite a difficult day's birding.
Hey folks, that was a tough day. We didn't get the water pipit. I did see a pipit that flew off, and I don't know if it was the water pipit or not. But regardless, I didn't get any footage of it, so I can't count it. So, not the easiest day's birding.
No, and where we were going to go, there's a shrike.
Oh yeah, we worked before we decided to make a mad rush to try and get this water pipit off our year list. We were going to go to a nature reserve called the Spinneys. I was there the other day to see a red-rumped swallow, and when we turned up here, somebody had reported a great grey shrike there, which is a bird we don't need for the year list, but it's still one of Kaylee's favourites. So she's feeling a bit sore about it, aren't you? Bless. Never mind. Sometimes birding is like this.
A couple of days later, myself and Kaylee headed up to Denby Moors. After my failure to find a merlin on our last video, I thought we'd give it another chance. And almost immediately as we drove down the road across the moors, a couple of birds of prey came into sight. This was a pair of buzzards. These weren't the only ones of this species up here.
Hey folks, we're up here on Denby Moors again. I brought Kaylee up with me, and we're hopefully again looking for merlin, although we've had a bit of a drive around and not seen any, but we've had lovely views of many buzzards and some red kites as well.
After enjoying the aerial acrobatics display given to us by the red kites, we watched yet another quite showy buzzard sat on a near post, and then headed on down the road to see if we could find our merlin. The reason we're looking for merlin up here is because of a couple of other local birders we know who have taken quite close photographs of them, but unfortunately it was seeming to be pretty elusive. Passing a field of sheep, I did notice a large flock of fieldfare. These large thrushes are winter visitors to the UK and usually move around in flocks. We drove up and down the roads for about an hour and a half, with again a no-show from the merlin. At one point Kaylee spotted a small bird of prey, but this was the local kestrel. This female bird I saw last time I was up here and is pretty confiding, letting us get reasonably close. We watched her for a short while and then noticed a male bird. He was sat on the crag overlooking the road. We now headed back to the car and back on the road towards the coast, as a couple of pretty interesting birds had been reported.
Hey folks, we're in Rill, or Kimmel Bay, at Horton's Nose. I hope you can hear us because it's a bit windy. Whilst we were up on the moors looking for merlin that we didn't find, somebody reported not one but two winter species of small bird that have arrived here, snow bunting and black redstart, so we thought they'd be worth a look.
Our first stop was the beach to look for the snow bunting, en route bumping into a local bird we know called Alex. He was on his lunch break from work. Luckily, he only worked about 5 minutes away. We searched the area of beach where the snow bunting had been reported, but we couldn't find it. And just as Alex walked away, another bird has shouted, "It's here, it's here!" So we hot-footed it over.
Excellent.
There's a snow bunting.
There's a snow bunting right in front of us. One of the other birders shouted, it's here, and it was right by his feet. Anyway, we've got it. It's about kind of 20 foot in front of us on the rock, just feeding. Awesome.
Love. We hit something.
Yeah, it's about time we hit something, yeah. So these are lovely birds. I love snow bunting. I think they're so cool. One of the best bits of the winter, really.
These awesome little buntings breed up in the Highlands of Scotland, around the Cairngorm mountain range, and in the winter disperse and generally end up around the coast on rocky cliffs and pebble beaches. And although I love watching these birds, we had to try and find the black redstart.
Right, we're now looking for the black redstart. We've actually split up. Kaylee's looking at the boatyard because I sometimes spend some time there apparently, and I'm looking on those pieces of kind of scrub land and hope that we find it. Stick with us, it'd be good to get both of them.
I headed to the grassy, scrubby area where we saw the black redstart earlier this year, and Kaylee headed to the boatyard where the bird is also sometimes seen. Presumably this may be the same female bird we saw earlier in the year, hopefully returning to spend the winter. Unfortunately, the only birds I saw on this grassy area were a pigeon and a magpie, with the latter looking at me very suspiciously as I videoed it. I now had a little bit of a walk down the path next to the boatyard, hoping to maybe get a glance of the black redstart. There were a few birds down here. The first one was an extremely confiding blackbird, and a little bit down the path, a robin. And although I peered through the railings into the boatyard, I didn't see any birds moving around. So I walked round to a slightly high position which looks over one side of the boatyard. But again, no black redstart. It looks like we may have failed on this one too. It had been a tough few days birding. The storm put a real hex on our plans to travel over to the east coast, which led to us unfortunately not getting any new birds for our year list. But it hadn't all been bad.
Hey folks, we found one bird and not the other. So we thought we were going to dip completely but luckily one of the other birders managed to literally pretty much fall over the snow bunting. So we got to see that. We looked around a bit for the black red start, but it's getting cold and we couldn't find it.
The boats or anything.
So anyway, it's been an interesting couple of days. Usually, obviously, we'd go away somewhere to the east coast or somewhere else to try and pick up missing birds for our year list. Obviously, due to the storm, we haven't had that luxury. So we've done a bit of local birding. We've seen quite a lot. We've had loads of birds of prey and stuff, haven't we? And it's nice to finish off with the snow bunting. But hopefully we can resume normal proceedings soon. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Please like,
Please subscribe.
and please press the notification bell. See you soon.
Bye.